Good morning, everyone. We are meeting early today. I have a special guest on, and so I wanted to make sure that I accommodated her schedule so that we can get her on today. But I'm excited. I've been wanting to speak with her for a while, ever since I've known about her work. I've been just really impressed and wanting to just learn more about her process. But today, we're going to be talking about Black women's history in art. And so I just want to welcome you once again to the Black Beauty Activist podcast. My name is Dr. Tameka Ellington. For those of you that don't know me, who's maybe you're watching or listening for the first time, but I am a scholar, a fashion scholar, empowerment speaker, author, and a lover of all things Black culture. And my next guest, I actually became acquainted with her work through my own research. So for the past 20 some odd years or so, I've been working as a fashion scholar. I started in my master's program and have been just really heavily entrenched in this topic that we all know of as Black hair. I was able to curate an exhibition called Textures, the History and Art of Black Hair that did really, really well, got a lot of international recognition. We published a book for the exhibition, also called Textures, the History and Art of Black Hair, myself and my co-curator, Dr. Joseph Underwood. And I'm on tour right now, actually, with my fifth book. My book is Black Hair in a White World, and I'm just very much so an advocate for teaching and helping people learn about the importance of Black beauty culture and how it really impacts our entire world. But my next guest, she did an exhibition that I absolutely loved. It's called the Tignon, is what it's called. And the way that I found out about it was because I was doing some research. I came across this thing called this legislation called the Tignon Law, which was established in Louisiana in the 18th century. And I was just really interested in it. And when I went on Google and put in Tignon, her exhibition came up, and I started looking through and was just amazed by all of the beautiful artwork. And I wanted to learn more. And so it's my pleasure to introduce you to fiber sculptor, educator, Chesley Antoinette. Hi, Chesley.
Hi, Tameka. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you so much for being with us. And we're going to jump right on in. I'll read your bio so everybody can know about a little bit more about you, and then we'll go right into the questions. Chesley Antoinette is a native Texan, conceptualizing with sustainable practices and forms of sculptural textile installations, wearable art, and curatorial projects. Her current body of work explores 18th century North American Saint Demic. How do you pronounce that?
Saint Dominica.
Dominica through turban head wraps, and shares the history in forms of art exhibitions, lecture series, and interactive educational workshops. She discovered the process of making art at the local community college, later transferred to Stephen A. Austin University in Nacogdoches with a bachelor's of fine arts in sculpture, and completed her formal education in Denton at the University of North Texas with an MFA in fiber arts. She currently splits her time between Austin and Dallas as an educator and practicing artist, while being passionate towards supporting, sharing, and building the appreciation for arts with Texas and all of mankind. So, Chesley, I'm excited to talk to you. I want to know as much as I can about the process of coming up with the exhibition. I see that I'm going to get a chance to see you tomorrow because we're going to be doing a panel discussion with all of the artists who are a part of the exhibition that I curated. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too. But I just want to know, how did you get started? How did you get started as an artist? Why art and why textiles?
So, like you said in my bio, I got started in the arts through my local community college. I was one of the first to go to college in my family. And so starting off at the community college, I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do. I thought at first I wanted to major in French because I studied French all throughout high school. And then I was really interested in fashion. And so those two just seemed to go together in my mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so one day I was taking like a ceramics or a sculpture course, and I saw one of my instructors, and I saw her lifestyle. She was an adjunct professor teaching sculpture, and then right down the street, there was a gallery, and she was showing her artwork there. And we were helping transport things, and I was like, that seems like a really cool career. That
Yeah.
sort of like balance of making art and teaching art, and
Yeah.
so that really inspired me, and I just continued the path until I got my MFA. And so lo and behold, here I am, making art and teaching.
Nice. That's awesome. Do you know, does she know that you were inspired by her? Have you told her?
I did reach out back to her once I finished my BFA at Stephen F. Austin. I had reached out to her, letting her know, thank you.
That's awesome.
But it took me a little while longer before I became into the teaching practice, because you need a little bit more than a BFA if you want to teach.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm sure one of the beautiful things about being a mentor or being someone who is being mentored by someone else, is that you never know what impact you have on people. And I'm sure she probably had no clue that she had impacted you the way that she did. And for you to, be able to tell her, what kind of impact I'm sure that made, that just brightened her up.
For sure. I mean, even as an educator, I will occasionally get emails from students talking about, thank you for, your class and how much we
Mhm.
appreciate it. Open my eyes to art. So those are always
Yeah.
really nice to get.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's why we do it. That's why we do it. All right. So I also wanted to find out, why in your art did you decide to focus on Black women in history? Because you could have chosen any topic to do your art on, but you were interested in women in history. What made you decide to do that?
Well, it really started with looking for a bit more depth in my work. So my work deals with like wearable art.
Yeah,
That's what it's always pretty much been, and it's upcycling. So taking the mundane and making it into something of value, of beauty, and so I was interested in that pathway. However, I wanted it to be a little bit deeper than that,
yeah.
and so taking inspiration from doing a study abroad in France for almost 11 months.
Nice.
I saw all of these like West African women in Paris wearing these like head wraps, and that's when I actually started to incorporate the head wrap into my personal style based on what I saw over there, and then just brought it back to Texas. And so it had been at least 10 years, and so I was like, where does the head wrap come from? What's its history? What's its North American history? And so I started digging into that, and that's when I became inspired to talk about, this law that I came across in 18th century America before it was America. And I've
Yeah,
always had an interest in history, and so that's really where that comes from, is looking to my personal lifestyle, and then trying to understand, this accessory, because
yeah.
that's what I love about accessories. They all have a narrative within them, and it makes them even more interesting to wear and share.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the Tignon Law, because I know that uh, before there was Louisiana, before what we know of as Louisiana, there was something else going on, right? And
Yeah.
that then impacted this thing that we know of as the Tignon Law. So can you talk a little bit about the history of that?
Yeah. So the Tignon Law came about within the Good Government Edict under the Spanish colonization of Louisiana. And so before you can even talk about 1786, you really have to go all the way back to like, which I do, is 1699,
Yeah,
when the founding of Louisiana occurred under French colonization.
yeah,
So when the French came in, um, they had it between like, early 18th century all the way up to maybe that mid 18th century point, like 1760, before the Spanish took over. But
Yeah.
before then, they were just a small, diverse group of like mixed Europeans of all backgrounds, French, German, Spanish, English, and they had a very difficult time surviving.
Mm.
And so really in the early beginnings, their population was not that large. However, because of the importation of Black people as slaves, they became the majority just, because of birth rates,
Yeah.
in comparison to like, the white Europeans. And so they become like that generation really becomes fully developed in like that mid 18th century point when the Spanish come in. And so when the Spanish arrive, what they're seeing socially is like this mixed atmosphere of, Black, white, Indian, all, interacting, whether it's in the marketplace, whether it's through, relationships of all sorts, business relationships, love relationships, children. This is just like this mixed atmosphere that they're coming across. And so for the Spanish Europeans, they believe in like purity of blood. And so
Yeah.
within that, this mixing of race is something that is they're very much so against. And so for like the Spanish, they've always had some sort of, really all of humankind, honestly, had some sort of like partiality or division in which they try to separate people, whether it's based on ethnicity, your wealth, your kinship, your occupation. And so for them, the race mixing was something that, King Charles III just would not have. And
Mm.
so they're looking for ways in which to not only prevent the mixing of race, but mostly the property, the wealth, the transferring of wealth. Because oftentimes what was happening is that a lot of these, women, the Black women, would become engaged or have interracial relationships with these men whom, they dearly loved, in which they would will them off, their property and so forth. And so
Yeah.
that whole transferring of wealth was something in which I think ultimately came apart of when when Governor Galvez, when he wanted to implement the Edict of Good Government, within that small section of his government edict, he mentions the wearing of the head wrap as they were formerly accustomed to.
Yeah.
And so that was to like separate them,
Mm.
but also sort of like demeanor them as well, because the head wrap was mostly associated to domestic or fieldwork slavery. It
Yeah.
wasn't actually, this sort of affluent looking type of accessory. And
Right.
so with that came, what they would call like, the Tignon Law.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of like backstory in order to understand how it came about.
Yeah.
For
What
sure.
fascinated me the most about the Tignon Law is how it was meant to oppress. It was meant to separate people, but really what it ended up doing was the total opposite. The
Yes.
women, they, you know, put these head wraps on and they created these amazing looks. Sometimes they would put a tiara on and maybe a little hat with like a little fascinator hat or something would be on top of it, or they did all kind of different color fabrics. It was a one way for them to be able to show the powers that be that just because you believe that you can oppress me does not mean that I'm an oppressed individual, right? And so that's what I love the most about it, because it was a way for us to be put in our place, but we showed up and came out of that on the better side. And so the Tignon Law actually kind of reminds me a little bit about what we're dealing with now with the Crown Act. And the Crown Act being, for those of you that don't know, people that are watching, the Crown Act was put into place in California first in 2019, July 3rd, 2019. It was legislation that was put in place through California. They wanted to make sure that African Americans would not be oppressed because of their choice to wear natural hair. And then New York picked it up, and then several other states picked it up. Texas, from what I understand, was the last state that actually picked up the Crown Act, which was wonderful. And so what's interesting about this whole thing is this legislation is meant to help Black people show up as themselves in public institutions. There's only 28 states so far that has passed the Crown Act. There's 22 states that still will not pass it, which again is a form of oppression of our head, right? Ohio, my state, unfortunately still has not passed the Crown Act. And it reminds me so much about what the Tignon Law was supposed to do and what the Crown Act, there's a little bit of a connection there. It's like the oppression is still there, but it's just in a different way. Them not passing it, there's absolutely no reason why they should have a problem with passing this law, but it's been up for debate and states are not passing it, so it's interesting to me. What are your thoughts on that?
So I guess I'm not fully clear on like the Crown Act as far as like you're saying that people are or it's a law in which it's allowing Africans to wear their natural hair, whether that be like braids or afros or you know what have you, in sort of like the workplace or educational institutions. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. So I guess my thoughts on that is, it's weird to suppress someone because of their hairstyle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I understand like maybe you don't want someone coming in with like a mohawk in the workplace, depending on like, the type of like job that it entails. But yeah, and I would actually want to know more about like the root of the, like, I guess the hairstyling, like where is that rooted in, what does the original law exactly say, when it comes to personal styling of the hair, what does that look like in order to better understand, those individual cases in which, people are being oppressed because of their hairstyle. I know like the Tignon, you saw the oppression clearly because of the interacting of blacks and whites intermixing together and having mixed children, and wanting a way to separate them and to devalue them within the public space. So that's like a clear like indication of this oppression that is occurring and why it is and what it's rooted in. So with the Crown Act, again, trying to understand more of what are these cases in which these individuals are being oppressed because of their hairstyle. Like, what does that situation look like?
Right. There's been so many cases. One that comes to mind was a young man, a high school student who was a wrestler. He had locks, and he was told by his coach or by a coach at the opposing school that he was wrestling that if he didn't cut off his locks, then they would work to disqualify him because his hair was not within regulation. And so at the match, one of the women who was working on his team, on the school's team, had to come over with scissors and cut off his hair right at the match in front of everybody.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's super like intense, especially in such a public display.
Absolutely. And then too, when people have locks in their hair, they have them for lots of different reasons. It could have been, connected to faith. It could have been connected to lots of different things. And so to be forced on the spot to cut your hair, or be disqualified, that was pretty harsh. There's been also women who work in the news and media who have been told that if they come back to work with their hair natural, they'll be fired. And some women have been fired because they want to wear braids or afros or other natural hairstyles to work. And so the Crown Act, it's an acronym for creating a respectable and open world for natural hair.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just hoping that eventually Ohio will wise up and just go ahead and pass the thing. We are in Ohio's been, I'm not really happy with Ohio right now.
Yeah.
So, but let's get back to you. So one of the things that I also wanted to find out from you is what are some new projects that you have coming up? So you're I was on your website and you had this beautiful display of these almost like origami lavender beautiful structures that were hanging and up on the wall or something. Like, can you talk a little bit about like what else do you have going on?
Yeah, so that's my tessellated fold project that you were referring to. That was
Yeah,
actually right before the Tignon project, and basically it was just taking a shape and making it into like a bigger shape. And so
yeah,
that was a very fun project because it involved. I love to collaborate with other artists, and so it involved like working with like a musician, with a choreographer, and also with a video artist, and so and bringing all those elements together, so creating like this sculptural installation atmosphere,
hmm,
and having other people relate to my work
yeah,
within their own interpretation is something that I really enjoy. And that's what the Tino project does. It's just this multi collaborative project, coming from like more of like a fashion editorial sense,
yeah,
especially when it comes to like the photography. So working with like a stylist, a makeup artist, models, a photographer, and so forth. And so that kind of stuff is really fun for me.
yeah,
So as of now, um, I just finished researching Saint Dominica that you mentioned earlier,
yeah.
as far as dealing with like 18th century history. And so I'm really interested in like the abolition of
Okay.
slavery. And so I'm trying to figure out like how do I want to convey that history. So with like the Tignon and with the photographs, like each photograph is generally accompanied with an essay that can
Yeah.
also be found on my website in order to understand more context behind the image. And so right now I'm just doing research on abolition of slavery and
Mm,
just trying to figure that world out and seeing exactly how I want to convey that. Definitely want to do like photography again, especially
yeah.
um, thinking of like a more of like a daguerreotype type early uh, histories of photography, and just playing around with that. And then in addition to that, I'm actually currently researching fashion trends in 18th century Louisiana in a
Okay.
collaborative book project. And
Nice.
so so far I've just done the first 50 years. I'm still doing the last 50 years, but those are some of my projects that I'm currently working on.
That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. I can't wait to see that. So it's gonna be it's gonna be the final product will be a book. Is that what you're saying, Chesley?
So the 18th century fashion trends, so that is a separate from the abolition of slavery. Those are
Okay.
two
Okay.
separate projects. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not
Nice.
sure what the abolition of slavery is going to wind up looking like. Who knows? It may be a book. I have been, that has been the suggestion.
Okay. One thing I might recommend that you look into is slave narratives.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know if you've ever gotten a chance to read some of those slave narratives, but they talk a lot about fashion in some of those, what people wore, how they wore their hair, those kinds of things. So that might be of interest to you, and it may add to what it is you're working on. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. You're welcome. Absolutely. So how can people stay connected with you and what can like when is your next show, what like so people can just stay connected and knowing what it is you're doing?
Well, I've got the current show up
Yes.
at the Massillon Museum. It's a group exhibition, but it features like the installation of the Tignon head wraps and some of the photographs. So if they happen to be Massillon, Ohio, up until
Yeah,
I guess May 23rd. I
yeah.
can't remember the end
May,
of the
May 19th. Yeah, May
May
19th.
19th.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And so that's taking place. And then as far as like staying in touch with me, I'm on Instagram. I usually post, what I'm having upcoming. I posted my stories. You can also be on my website to check out my work as well. It's a great way to stay in touch.
Nice. You know what, if I could have planned this a little bit better, you know what I would have asked you to do? I would have asked you, because I know that when you first started the Tion project, it started with workshops. You were doing
Yes.
those first. And I know when I got a chance to look at a video, one of the things that you were doing in the workshop was showing ladies how to do head wrap ties.
Yes.
And so if I would have planned this a little bit better, I would have had you do a demo for us, because I wear hair wraps all the time and I do different things with them. And people are always asking me for, how did you do that?
Oh, yes.
X, Y, and
Yes.
Z. And so, girl, next time we'll have to figure that thing out, because people and you have what? Okay, y'all. For those of you that are close in proximity to Massillon, Ohio, which is about an hour out of Cleveland, if you're close, please come. There's an entire wall that was dedicated just to Chesley's head wraps. There's like over 50 head wraps in all different colors, different fabrics. And you will just be utterly amazed when you see all of the things that can be done with a head wrap. And it just reminds me, it puts me in the mindset of what our women, our ancestors had to go through during the Tignon Law phase, and having to come up with these creative ideas about how to wear these wraps that they were forced to wear. And so the fact that you were able to come up with 50 different ways to tie it with all of these different fabrics and these accessories and things that you added to it it's just beautiful. So please come, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to show the work. Always
Absolutely.
happy to.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said yes. When I reached out to you and told you that I wanted to show it, I'm glad you said yes. Thank you. So this is going to be, we're going to be ending now. And this is like the end of the exhibition. Well, before we end, I'll just say, for those of you that don't know about the exhibition, as Chesley mentioned, there's a show at the Massillon Museum that I've curated called it's called Home Again, the Embodiment of Africa Through Art and Fabric. And it features several artists. There's 5 artists in the show. Chesley is one of those artists. And if you are in the area, please come through. We're actually tomorrow. Chesley is actually sitting in a hotel right now. She is going to be at the Massillon Museum tomorrow. We are going to be doing an artist panel. So you'll get a chance to meet the artist, you'll get a chance to see the exhibition and have some great conversation. So please come through. I would love to see you. I know a lot of you all have, mentioned being interested. So please come on through. And I thank you all for listening. And thank you, Chesley, for being
Thanks for
on the
having me.
show today and working around the tight schedule that we had. So I appreciate you.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for this opportunity. And
You're
I look forward to
welcome.
seeing you tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah. You too. Bye.
Bye bye. All right, everybody. So this is the part of the show where I think it's critically important as an educator, as a fashion scholar. It's important for me to always have some kind of a reference or some kind of a resource that you can use to help you with learning more about the topics at hand. It's important for me as a scholar to let you all know that these topics are not just topics that are important to Dr. Tameka. These are topics that have been researched. These are topics that other people find really interesting, and topics that need more research, because these are some, I always talk about these critical things that are ever changing, that definitely do impact our society. Just like when Chesley and I were talking, the Tignon Law, even though it was geared towards and catered towards, I don't know if cater is the right word, but it was geared towards Black women and the oppression of Black women, it impacted the entire society. So just because the topic of Black hair is something that I may talk about often, doesn't mean that it's just something that impacts people with Black, quote unquote, Black texture hair. This is something that impacts our entire society. That's why it's important for me to bring this to you, bring this conversation up, and then also to offer other scholarly references that you can use to become more educated about these topics. And so there's an article called Africans in French America by the National Park Service, U.S. Department of the Interior. They have a great article there that talks about, just like what Chesley and I were talking about, the beginning stages of the development of Louisiana when the French and Spanish were there. This article talks about that, and then it even talks about the Tignon Law as well. So please pick that article up if you are wanting to know more about the Tignon Law in the beginning of the Louisiana that we know of today. And I thank you all for watching. I thank you for being with me today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please tell someone. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Send a message. I see there's some comments on here. Thank you all for commenting. I'll get to your comments as soon as I jump off of here. But thank you for commenting. Thank you for watching. And always remember, on the other side of fear is your beautiful confidence. Have a wonderful day, everybody.